All right, can we start? All right, I see a big thumb up. I hope nobody minds that we move up this closing section by 30 minutes so we can go home 30 minutes earlier. If you mind, let me know. All right. So this is our last 30 minutes for the two-day symposium, so just hang with us for 30 more minutes, okay? I hope you find the last 2 days helpful. Most importantly, I hope you enjoy the last 2 days. And we'd like you to go take home ideas that you would like to try out, new approach that you want to test, and new research idea that you want to develop. So here is how we're going to organize ourselves for the next 30 minutes. I have invited all our track leads to come to the podium, and they're gonna give us 5 minutes summary of takeaway points from their tracks. Okay, on page 6, it lists all the tracks. We have 5 tracks. I also asked Frank, he's gonna summarize our color workshop. So they will give us 5 minutes summary of takeaways. And if we have time and you have questions, we open up the floors. So each gentleman has 5 minutes, okay? So shall we start with the cross-cutting, which is Charles?
So I sat in the middle, so I wouldn't have to go first, but that's okay. We can, we'll start with cross-cutting, sure.
I go by order right here.
No, it's okay. So there's So cross-cutting, there was obviously by the definition of cross-cutting, there was a tremendous amount of subjects that were part of the different tracks. So I'm just going to go through. Thank you for all the moderators for sending their information in, since obviously couldn't be everywhere at once. So I'm going to go real high level into just some really quick takeaways. Kind of from the first session, that visualization can be a tool that can be used to demonstrate transportation inequity and kind of ways that we can find solutions. We also saw the value of picking implementable problems to solve, which was brilliant. And then the combination of good choice in combining videos, charts, and infographics can be really instrumental in good outreach and communications. The second session, we talked about the process of visualizing data, that the process of visualizing data in and of itself can be valuable, since it can help to identify underlying issues in data. Involving stakeholders early in processes is very important, as it helps to connect and link different areas and actors and agencies that normally wouldn't work together. And then real-time data can be used for varieties of purposes, planning and operations. It's kind of the collect once, use many times paradigm. The third session, we learned about some of the unique ways to have data agreements, to inform decisions, things like, particularly from private companies that might have proprietary information, there's ways to explore, getting information that can be useful, that's, through ways that typically have barriers to getting it. And let's see, a fourth one, our fourth session, really kind of the value of providing easily accessible platforms for data that can be accessed by multiple stakeholders in the public. So, again, collecting that data and then making it as accessible as we can. Do you want to talk about future looking forward? Or
Yes, just 1 minute. Your view of the future.
My view of the future, kind of three main ideas. How to visualize uncertainty. A lot of the ways we visualize things now have like an implied certainty about them, but how can we kind of show the true range of uncertainty in a way that doesn't confuse people? Kind of ways to come up with predictive visualizations and visualizing potential outcomes. These are our inputs. What could the potential outcomes be, and how can that inform our decisions? And then kind of people-centric visualizations. What's in it for me? Kind of the people are selfish, from the opening session yesterday. Are there ways we can take lessons from that and apply that to transportation? So that's all I have, Matt.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Charles. Next is performance measures. Matt?
All right. Yeah, thank you very much. Hope you can all hear me. So we had 6 great sessions that we organized in this track on performance measures or performance management. PM can stand for lots of different things, but in the program it's performance measures. But we cover a wide range of topics, from talking about visualizing multimodal transportation, freight, operations, transportation performance management in general, and then safety. So we covered quite a range of topics in our 6 sessions. I think the biggest thing that I saw, and this is probably not a earth-shattering insight or anything like that, but just the idea of how visualization is so crucial in that role of communicating the value that's in data. So data by itself really doesn't do anything for us. It's not until we actually use it to make a decision that we are gathering any value from data, right? And so I think visualization is such an enabler to be able to take the value that's in data and help expose it. And we saw that through a lot of the sessions that were part of this particular track. And I want to thank all of the presenters and the moderators and the folks who helped organize the sessions for making this all possible, because I think we saw some really incredible stuff. For example, talk about something, where there's a lot of different possibilities. Brittany Gerhardt talked about this planning tool that was enabling the development of an 8,000-mile bicycle trail system across the whole state of Texas. And there's a lot of local decisions that have to be made within that, and a lot of those decisions are complex and multifaceted, and they were able to develop a visualization tool that helped enable those decisions kind of to occur in like different mindsets, whether it was looking at trying to expedite the process, attacking low-hanging fruit, looking for showcase projects. Those were the kinds of scenarios that were being provided through the tool that helped, I think, to really shine the light on, what were the objectives that agency, that local region might have, and then how the data can support decisions that would support what they want to achieve. We saw some really great stuff about freight in our sessions. Many presentations that touched on the topic of freight movement, freight fluidity, and I think some really innovative ways of kind of looking at some specific questions, like, what can we do to help facilitate better truck parking? We had a couple presentations on that topic, to very general kinds of things about, how is freight moving across a multimodal network, and how can we help optimize our networks to better facilitate that. And so much of it's really about some of these like local decision making about how can we optimize that network, and many times the data that we can see in these visualizations is helping to support those decisions. Then, we saw a really interesting set of presentations kind of focusing on some operational or planning questions maybe, from very hyper-specific things like, how do we visualize data to help us improve signal timing, which is a very specific kind of thing for traffic operations, all the way to, or traffic engineering, all the way to, a very broad set of dashboards that can help facilitate planning, looking at data from tens of thousands of different directions potentially, and I think again, we're seeing that we're enabling users to gain insights from data in a useful way through visualization products, and so I think that was some really great stuff. We had good sessions on transportation performance management, as I mentioned earlier, that was in this room for those of you that were here earlier, and then also a good session on safety, kind of focusing on how, again, visualization of data can help us improve the safety of our network, such a critical thing for us to consider. So those are really the 6 sessions, that some highlights from the 6 sessions. There are certainly many other things, and I would encourage you all to watch the videos once they're posted, to go back and review the content. I think there's certainly a few that I am looking forward to going back and watching again, just to kind of pick up some things that I might have not quite caught the first time. I will say, in terms of kind of looking to the future, Charles, you really had to kind of hit the highlights from my perspective. I mean, I really echo what you were saying about this idea of how can we, we're, I think, getting really moving the ball forward in terms of how we're visualizing data, but how do we a lot of the data we have has a lot of uncertainty around it, and how do we help our users understand that, you know, what we're showing is not necessarily a deterministic path forward, but is one of a range of many opportunities that are out there. Obviously, you know, real-time data is current, but when we're thinking, many times what we're trying to do is forecast what's going to be happening in the future, or how should we react in the future, and that future is uncertain. And so I think that's a real opportunity area for us as we kind of think ahead.
Thank you, Matt. All right. Our next track is BIM. David?
Thanks, Patricia. So just to kind of get things kicked off, I think BIM is building information modeling, or some are now calling it better information management, is kind of it's a different aspect of visualization. You know, you can visualize data so that you can understand it better, or you can visualize something physical, like a 3D model or of a project or your transportation system, in order to do many things. You know, so I think BIM is in that space where we're trying to connect with visualization, where it helps us solve problems in 3D, 4D space. So let me talk a little bit about the presentations. The first set were around the idea of project delivery. So while BIM looks to leverage life cycle asset information, geospatial primarily, you know, it begins, or the journey of data is it's created much of it during the project delivery process. So we heard from Juan Loaiza, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing this poorly, and Cameron Smeets, where they talked about using 4D, which is the meshing of a 3D model with a schedule, so that you can see not just the beginning and the end of a project, but you see, you know, the intermittent phases and issues that you may find as a project is built, and that was used on a project in Texas. And then we heard during this session from Jennifer Steen on the quality management that's needed in order to make sure that a model is going to be something that can be relied on, you know, as it gets created. We're used to using 2D type things to communicate, but now as we move to 3D, there'll be a whole new set of quality you know, management activities. And then the second session of BIM had to do with this idea of a digital twin. So in essence, now we're looking at how will you go beyond project delivery to leveraging the full life cycle data of an asset in something that, you know, it's a virtual representation of your transportation system. You know, it's a bit of an ideal, but it's caught a lot of momentum. So we heard from, and it's being done. I mean, I could show you examples of digital twins, both in the transportation and outside. But we heard from Terry Bills from Esri, as he talked about, you know, how GIS, you know, helps us to, you know, basically visualize and connect this life cycle asset information, and then to continually update that information so that we can be managing our transportation systems with a single source of truth. There's a term, you know, where it's like all data can be brought together and we can rely on it as a single source of truth. Then we also heard from Bruce Aquila from Hexagon and some of the work that they're doing in the railroad industry, also to create digital twins of their systems in order to continually maintain them, you know, and be able to resolve issues virtually where possible. And lastly, we heard from Aaron Costin from the University of Florida, some work that he's done to try to develop I guess a preventative system for structures health monitoring, where they would use weigh in motion to make sure that overloaded trucks do not make it onto a bridge, and that would be all built inside of a digital twin system. That same system would then be used, historical information would be tapped and be used for longer-term evaluation of structures and how to better build our structures. The next session was on emerging trends for BIM, and so we talked about open data standards and how we're expecting open data standards like industry foundation classes, IFC, ISO 19650, standard on information management. We're expecting that will help us to just radically improve the way we exchange information. Currently, if you've worked with many projects, there are one-off solutions for how data is exchanged between different software, and so with open data standards, we expect to be able to share that information better. Jag Malella talked about, that was Jennifer Steen. Jennifer Steen and Roger Grant talked about current work in the highway sector to make that data more exchangeable using the IFC standard. Jag Malella talked about making the invisible visible. This is really, I think, a very good connection to this symposium on visualization, because he talked about how it's only with a model and certain BIM functions that you can begin to see things that otherwise you wouldn't see, especially in 2D. Then we ended that session with Phil Bell and Chuck Hickson talking about some challenges for implementing BIM, as well as some examples, some case studies for how the New York State DOT used BIM and 3D, 4D, and 5D modeling in order to build several billion-dollar projects. And Phil had some examples of performance measures that were not only demonstrating the cost effectiveness, but other measures of effectiveness, real examples of benefit from using BIM. Finally, our last session was on BIM for maintenance and lifecycle asset management, and we heard from UGrid, Todd Fagan, Don Falcon, and Jung, and I'm sorry I can't remember your last name, Jung, but and they talked about how UGrid allowed the Washington, D.C. Metro to map its system, and with that virtual model of their system, they were able to complete a very important project to bring internet into the system for emergencies and so forth. And then also that virtual model has continued to be used by WMATA for other subsequent projects. Then we heard from Tennessee Department of Transportation, Austin and Morgan, talked about how they have created an inventory for their culvert system, which they took that inventory information to take it and created dashboards to communicate critical information for their executives and for their maintenance people and for the public. And then finally, Natalia from Louisiana State talked about her research where to determine the challenges for incorporating or to deploy BIM. And she talked about some of the most cited benefits of BIM being quality control and risk management, easy access to information, and some of the main challenges were just the change of culture in implementing BIM and the complexities of moving from 2D to 3D. So if you're interested, they're still collecting information from different stakeholders as far as what are the challenges and benefits related to BIM, implementing BIM. So I didn't put the timer on myself, so I may have gone too long, but I would say the future, from my perspective, would be connecting research like what TRB does more intentionally to deployment. I call it the pipeline of innovation, and just kind of trying to think about how symposiums like this could help us come away with action, for the next step of some kind of a prototype or something that really moves us forward. And I think that for BIM, it will be as we develop these data standards, I think we're going to see some very radical improvements in the productivity as far as the way we utilize data, and because it's going to be much more easy to move that data between different tools that we use for analysis, automation, and so forth. So I think I'll stop with that.
Thank you, David. All right, so I'm going to say this like 4 times, right, Kevin? Participatory simulation.
Good.
right, Kevin.
Participatory simulation, or what I would like to call immersive simulation. We had several tracks on tools that allow users to actually experience the design intent of a project. This would include interactive models, VR, AR, a lot of these more innovative visualization tools. I think there were some real kind of high-level threads that were coming up in all of the presentations. One that was kind of interesting that one of my moderators pointed out was kind of related to the Cheeky Esteban's comment again about selfish, clients are selfish. You know, they don't really care what media you're using or what tools you're using. They just want their goals met. They want their project communicated in the right way and to the right audience. Another very broad thing that came out of a couple of the talks was talk to your client and find out what it is they're really trying to do before you select the media you're going to use. Because quite often we see projects that are really just overkill or using the wrong media to really convey the right message, the simple message that the client needs. So we're consultants as much as we are producers of content, and that's an important aspect of this. And then I think there were 2 very important things that came out of all of this immersive interactive media benefits that we're going to see more and more, I think. You know, these included things like remote training tools, how to train people to assemble and fabricate elements, remote ways of seeing designs for a future project. But the key to that is that they can be used remotely so that they can be provided to anybody, anywhere, not necessarily needing to be at the project or on the project site. There are certainly advantages with AR where you can do things on the site where you're extending the experience on site. But that idea of remoteness, I think, is going to be very important. And another part of that is accessibility. These are realistic experiences, and so they're really kind of available to anybody. They're meant to be used by the lay audience. They don't need technical experts to understand them. So we're providing information about projects to just about anybody who wants to access it. And then the last one that kind of relates to that same idea of remoteness is safety. You know, we're seeing these tools now being used for training, for inspection, and we're able to do a lot of the actual work remotely from the site. So we can minimize closures to bridges, for instance, or closures to transit projects, and then do the evaluation off-site and take your time and do it right, or potentially to do it downstream. WMATA talked about how they're using their model of the tunnel, you know, 8 years after it was captured to use it in another way. So we're improving safety, we're improving potentially cost in closing down systems to capture these kinds of data. So in terms of the future, you know, being a content developer for these innovative tools, I just see the tools getting cheaper, higher fidelity, better quality presentations. I think it's just going to, you know, make these key uses of those tools that much more accessible to us, and we're going to see more and more of these really wonderful ways of looking at projects virtually. So.
Thank you, Kevin. Mm-hmm. So the next one is geotag subsurface visualization. Derek?
Yeah, thank you. All right, so I'm going to apologize to those folks in the audience a little bit. I may repeat a few things because during our session, while I was attempting to take notes, I was also captivated by what our speakers were presenting. So every so often I was like, oh, that's so cool, I should write something down. And so then I did. So things are maybe a little more haphazard than some of the other folks up here on the platform, but hopefully I can make sense of our session for you. I would like to thank our four speakers just right off the bat. I think that Gabe, Mark, Santiago, and Alex did an excellent job bringing the current state of affairs of geotechnical visualization to the folks during our session. A lot of different highlights. Straight out of the gate, we had a presentation that talked about what Washington State Department of Transportation was doing, and it focused on different aspects, in terms of, the people doing the work and the processes and the things that are being delivered and the type of data that that organization has had historically and the type of the data that they're getting currently and the type of data that they're expecting in the future, and how those different types of data need to be interrelated with one another to be used for engineering design internal to the department, but also externally facing to the consumers today that are now expecting data, for their use that they can go and get instantly on a website, as opposed to being used internally for engineering design. Interesting details from that presentation were also the number of people in their organization that were comfortable with some of these tools and the rapid, acceleration of technologies. We're now having, we never had people who did GIS, and now we have GIS professionals. We never had people that did visualization, and now we have visualization or data management professionals. We never had game designers, and now we have people in gaming architecture to make real-world representations of the subsurface. So we've moved from one-dimensional borings of the subsurface into two-dimensional cross-sections, into two-dimensional cross-sections perhaps augmented with real-time information and change detection. And now we're talking about making three-dimensional models and volumes of surfaces and of the subsurface. So lots of exciting information there. We also talked about how difficult it is to access some of the historic data. But geotechnical data is some of the most expensive to get. Taking a drill crew out to a site is sometimes tens of thousands of dollars and weeks of time, depending upon the difficulty of access and whether or not they're boring in soil and rock and what they need to investigate. We talked about aspects of scale, making some of the images that we're doing, providing something in there so that you can tell whether or not you're looking at microscopic rock fractures or gigantic rock faces. Mark, our second speaker, did an excellent job talking about a landslide project in Alabama and incorporating measurement data and showing how this could be seen not only on a screen or on an iPad, but also using the Microsoft HoloLens technology for a more immersive experience. And his talk also talked about, the concept of making the data useful. The data that we get in geotechnical engineering is used by a number of different groups. So you can imagine the hydraulic engineers are interested in groundwater transport. The structural engineers are trying to determine whether or not there's excessive settlement for their structures that could cause deformation problems, and perhaps whether or not an entire alignment needs to be changed. And so Mark was showing us some of the latest technologies and how you're able to, at your desk today, use a 3D image, and how we can now bring that to groups that perhaps had never seen or understood geotechnical data very well previously, rather than looking through a stack of hundreds of sheets of paper of cross-sections or 90-page static reports. Now you have the opportunity to provide a HoloLens, and perhaps there are stakeholders it's their first time at a committee meeting or something because they're interested in it. So some exciting stuff there. The next two presentations focused on some of the aspects that we deal with in terms of building embankments, liquefaction, seismic design, and the dynamics there. So a lot of information provided more from the analytical side and how we're able to show design values, friction angles, cohesions, and other things that we use in the geosciences for the borings to be used in our computer software for analytics. And then Alex wrapping us up with very interesting presentations showing some fly-throughs of areas and talking about the meaningful information that we can use when we're looking at corridors for rock cliffs and how things now can be seen in an entirely different way. Wrapping up the future, I think it's connecting the dots. We are looking in the geotechnics side to do more work with BIM, to take our information and make sure it's meaningful in all phases of program delivery, scoping, planning, pre-design, design, transportation, asset management, directing it for both internal and external users, and as I think has been said a number of times here, keeping our digital data digital, not having it acquired by digital technology and then putting it on paper and in a file somewhere in a filing cabinet and then having contractors completely recreate the information, but to make it a better and more seamless process. So I'd say we're looking forward with our colleagues to connecting the dots.
Thank you, Derek. So Frank, you want to take us home by summarize our color workshop?
So Teresa Marie Ryan, our color maven, did an encore presentation from the last workshop and did a deep dive into color theory, looking at the historical issues, practical, theoretical, and reality. And why it matters is that color can be used to communicate data effectively or to just confuse with a colorful confusion. So she wanted us to be completely aware of color deficiency so that, because color deficiency keeps many people from actually seeing the data itself. You know, she looked at color gamuts and all sorts of different ways of describing those and left us with the practical tool of Adobe Capture that is a tool that we can actually use to improve and create color theories. And one of my takeaways is it would be great for our next symposium to actually do a hands-on workshop of color where we each bring our laptops or iPads and go places and actually apply color and see how well we can do this.
Great idea. Great idea for the next symposium, right? All right.
Oh, and one final thing is all of the presentations will be put on YouTube. So they've been all captured. They're going to go on YouTube. They will be on the TRB VIZ.org site. It's assuming we can get control back of it. It is a Google site. The Google site is there, how we get to it. But we'll make sure that everybody gets that link, especially as it goes out. It'll probably go out, you know, presentation by presentation. So as soon as they start going out, I will send you links and updates, you know, to everybody who registered for the conference so you can see it. Because this is definitely one of those presentations that watching it a second time, you will see a lot more things than you did the first time.
Thank you, Frank. All right. So before we leave here, let's give a big round of applause to our patron. Hold on. Our patron, our planning committee members, our presenters, our moderators, our TRB staff, and every one of us here that we didn't do anything. Because just being here make this symposium a very successful event. So thank you very much and have a safe travel home. Any questions? I'm sorry. Any questions?
Comments?
Comments?
Answers.
Hope to see you in 2 years. Back here. All right.